Talking about Mercy is honestly harder than it should be, and not because it's incomprehensible or poorly made, but because it exists in an uncomfortable gray area we are actively living in. This isn't some distant future anymore. The conversation around AI, automation, and decision-making systems has already entered real life in a very public and very uncomfortable way. And because of that, watching Mercy feels less like observing a thought experiment and more like looking into a distorted mirror of the present. It wants to ask massive questions about justice, morality, and human responsibility, but it also seems acutely aware that audiences already have strong opinions on the subject. Instead of challenging those opinions head on, the movie dances around them, hesitant to provoke, hesitant to accuse, and hesitant to fully commit to its own implications. The result is a film that feels cautious in a world that no longer is. From the very beginning, you can sense that this movie is trying to balance relevance with accessibility. It doesn't want to alienate viewers who are optimistic about technology, but it also doesn't want to ignore the fear that comes with surrendering human judgment to machines. That tension defines the entire film, for better or for worse. At its core, Mercy is built around a concept that should be deeply unsettling. The idea that an artificial intelligence system armed with limitless information can assist in or outright determine matters of justice. The film establishes early on that this system has access to everything. Every document, every statistic, every behavioral pattern, basically every recorded human decision ever made. It knows more than any individual ever could, and it processes that knowledge without fatigue, bias, or emotional interference. And yet, the film strangely refuses to concentrate on how terrifying that actually is. Instead of treating this omniscience, however you say that word, as a moral rupture, Mercy treats it as a narrative convenience. Characters acknowledge it, sometimes even express discomfort outright, but the story quickly moves past those moments as if the implications are really obvious. They're not. In fact, they're the most important part of the discussion. The film's stated theme seems to be that justice is not something that can be calculated or perfectly optimized. Justice, according to this film, is messy and relies on empathy, intuition, and moral interpretation, qualities that machines lack. But here's where the contradiction begins to surface, because instead of showing how this lack of humanity leads to catastrophic failure, the movie repeatedly shows the AI making mistakes almost as if it was human, which raises an uncomfortable question the film never truly answers. If the machine fails the same way we do, then what exactly makes us more qualified? One of the most baffling creative choices in Mercy is how often it frames the AI not as a threat, but as something that deserves understanding. The system isn't portrayed as cruel or having too much authority. It doesn't relish control. It doesn't even appear indifferent. Instead, it's framed almost like a child with too much responsibility, bound by logic, constrained by programming, and incapable of comprehending the emotional consequences of its actions. The film repeatedly invites the audience to recognize that the AI system is doing its best. What? And while that's, it's an interesting angle, sure, it directly clashes with the film's supposed critique of removing humanity from justice. Sympathy becomes a strange moral detour. Rather than reinforcing the danger of relying on machines, the movie risks almost normalizing it. By humanizing the AI's failures, Mercy blurs the line between accountability and inevitability. The machine didn't choose to make the wrong decision, it simply followed its logic. But isn't that the exact reason it shouldn't be trusted with moral authority in the first place? The film never reconciles the contradiction, leaving the audience suspended between discomfort and reluctant empathy. When it comes to the discussion of this film, a lot of people pointed to the real-time countdown mechanic as a major flaw, arguing that it makes the movie feel freaking last forever. But I actually think it does the opposite. The ticking clock doesn't slow the film down. It actually kind of, I don't want to say sharpens it because that feels like too much of a compliment. But you know, it gives every conversation, every hesitation, and every revelation, I'm doing too much rhyming there, a sense of consequence. What's especially effective is how the film uses the time as a psychological weapon rather than a gimmick. Each time the countdown reappears, it's a reminder that decisions are being made, whether the characters are ready or not, and they're going like freaking fast. And strangely enough, that pressure never becomes exhausting. Instead, it creates a sort of momentum. There were multiple moments where they would put the clock back in the screen and I would be surprised on just how much time had passed. The story moves with such control that the clock becomes less of a distraction and more of a pulse, I guess. It keeps the narrative alive, constantly nudging it forward, refusing to let it stagnate. Nearly the entirety of Mercy takes place in one confined location, a choice that could have easily made the film really freaking boring, but instead it becomes one of its greatest strengths, believe it or not. The limited space amplifies the sense of powerlessness that Chris Pratt's character has. There is no escape, no change of scenery to provide relief, no external word to remind us that life continues beyond these walls, especially because apparently everything stops and just focuses on this one case. It's weird. As the film progresses, the environment begins to feel less like a setting and more like a trap. Conversations echo, silences grow really heavy. The lack of movement mirrors the lack of agency experienced by the characters themselves. I mean, actually there is quite a lot of movement, especially in the action scenes, but you're watching them through a screen. So, well, you're watching everything through a screen, but you're watching it through a screen of Chris Pratt looking through a screen. It's freaking weird. The lack of move. Oh wait, I already said that. They are stuck, not just physically, but morally forced to confront decisions that cannot be undone. The central mystery of Mercy is undeniably compelling while you're watching it. The film knows how to withhold information and when to reveal it just to keep you interested enough, and how to escalate stakes without completely losing control. Actually, who am I kidding? This shit goes crazy. It's the kind of narrative that keeps you pulling you forward, even when you sense that some of its logic may not hold up. But once the film ends, yeah, you're good. Mercy is a movie that works best in real time. Under pressure, surrounded by the collective tension of an audience, its ideas linger just long enough to feel substantial, but not long enough to demand you rewatching it. It doesn't stay with you. It doesn't demand that you watch it again. It simply exists. You go watch it, you go out and you're like, I like that, and then you're probably gonna forget about the movie in a week. That isn't necessarily a failure, but it does limit the film's impact, especially given the weight of its subject matter, or the subject it thinks it handles. And I've said some good, I've said some bad, but I have to say that the biggest flaw of this movie is not what it says, but what it refuses to say. I've mentioned how the film stops just short of taking a definitive stance on this whole AI subject. It gestures towards criticizing it without fully embracing it. It feels like it also wants to embrace it, saying that we have to do better, but it's weird. In a story about AI controlling justice, being neutral feels less like a balance and more like avoiding the real problem. The film seems terrified of choosing a side and alienating its audience, and in doing so, it sacrifices clarity. Had it fully committed to one side, obviously being anti-AI because AI sucks, into the moral horror of its premise and allowed itself to be confrontational, it probably could have been far more powerful. Instead, it chooses to not pick a side and basically makes its message it doesn't even transmit a message. That's the thing. It doesn't choose a side, and then it doesn't know what message it wants to give. Look, despite all its contradictions, Mercy is far from the disaster I've seen some people make it out to be. It's tense, well-paced, pretty good directed, and genuinely engaging in the moment. It's also a movie that feels more made for watching it with a group or an audience because it amplifies its strengths, but then it also makes the weakness a little bit more obvious because then the audience is like, wait, what the hell is going on? This is easily one of the stronger January releases in recent memory. I actually felt very entertained by it, even if it does feel like this is going to make more noise in streaming. Well, not more noise, but it's definitely gonna get more views when it comes to streaming. It's not bold enough to be a warning about AI. It's not confident enough to embrace that we have to accept that AI is going to be in the future. It's like I said, it exists in an uncomfortable gray area, reflecting not just confusion about AI, but our own uncertainty about the systems we're already building. And in that sense, maybe Mercy is more honest than it appears. Not because it has the answers, but because it doesn't know what to do with the questions the same exact way we don't. With all of this said, I'm going to give Mercy a 5.7 out of 10. It's not bad, it's not good, but like I said, if it had taken a side on this whole AI thing, it probably would have been way better. But that is just my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.